session on peacekeeping around the globe.
The successful mediation in a number of areas, including facilitating ceasefire agreements, the exchange of prisoners, and peace agreements around the world. Madam President, when it comes to the situation in the Gulf, the state of Qatar continues its tireless efforts with its peers in the region and the world to guarantee an ongoing ceasefire between the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran. It resulted from the mediation efforts of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan in order to prevent a return to escalation, to guarantee freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, to spare the people of the region the repercussion of any new escalation. All parties should respond to the efforts of mediation to pave the way for addressing this crisis through peaceful means to prevent a renewed escalation. It is important to fully adhere to Security Council Resolution 552 and Resolution 2817. We reaffirm the responsibility of the Council to carry out its role in this regard. The State of Kuwait strongly condemns the Iranian attacks against the State of Kuwait, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. These are a blatant violation of the sovereignty of these countries, and they violate the rules of international law. The State of Qatar underscores that any attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz or any legal characterization that would limit freedom of navigation runs counter to international law, including the UNCLOS. We reaffirm the need to respect the freedom of navigation and free and safe passage in the strait as a natural international waterway. The role of the Security Council is decisive in achieving peaceful political solutions. One of the main lessons learned from the successes of the Council in shouldering its responsibility is the unity of the Council that led to the adoption of Resolution 2803 on the situation in Gaza. This could be built upon to implement Security Council resolutions and strengthen its efforts to achieve political solutions in the Middle East and beyond. In this regard, we refer to the joint mediation efforts of the State of Qatar alongside Egypt, the US, and Turkey to reach a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip last October. All parties must honor their obligations, fully implement the agreement, and open crossings to guarantee the sustainable and uninterrupted flow of humanitarian assistance to the Strip. We also reaffirm our commitment to the Board of Peace, and we support its efforts to reach a final settlement. We will continue to coordinate humanitarian and development efforts with our partners to guarantee a response to the urgent needs, and we support the path of recovery and reconstruction. In this regard, we reaffirm our firm position to achieve a just, comprehensive, and lasting settlement of the Palestinian question based on the principle of the two-state solution pursuant to international law and relevant UN resolutions to achieve the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people to establish their independent state along lines June 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital. We remain ready to work with the Council and all our partners to strengthen dialogue and mediation to achieve peace in the region and strengthen our bilateral and international partnerships in the humanitarian areas and development to break the vicious cycle of conflicts. I thank you.
Gracias.
I thank the representative of Qatar, and I now give the floor to the Syrian Arab Republic.
Bien, ¿cómo estamos?
Aquí. Ya.
Continuamos normalmente.
شكرا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome you in this council, and we thank you for holding this important meeting on mediation in our region, which needs and recognizes the importance of mediation, for the people of the region have paid a heavy price due to its absence. Mr. President, New Syria takes pride in adopting in its foreign relations a balanced, moderate approach based on dialogue and cooperation to build the best best relations with all countries of the world, away from the policies of destructive alliances and axes. We reaffirm that we will continue with this approach to achieve the interest of our people and to guarantee stability and prosperity for all. Dear colleagues, throughout its long history, Syria has known war as much as it has known peace. It recognizes the importance of peaceful means to resolve conflicts and end wars. We also fully know the challenges and difficulties confronting the role of mediators. We also know how difficult it is for parties to a conflict to agree on an honest mediator. Today we will not focus on difficulties, we will focus on positive aspirations and exploring solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, recently, Syria has emerged from an era of war and crises. Syria now has good relations with everyone, and it is trying to seize this opportunity to bring perspectives together and start to practice the role of a positive mediator in a number of regional files. This is considered a paradigm shift for Syria in this era of recovery and renaissance. This radical political transformation in Syria contributed to diffusing an international conflict that could have lasted for decades. Unfortunately, Syria has turned from an arena for conflict for regional and international powers during the past 15 years to a state where achieving security and stability is a true and genuine interest for all these powers. Today, with the current regional and international balances, Syria is seeking to practice its natural role in the heart of the most complicated region in the world. It is high time for Syria to go back to being a center of civilizations and religions, a meeting point linking the East with the West, a route for trade, peace and prosperity. Syria wants and is capable of adding value to regional stability based on our expertise and history. Mr. President, the UN Charter, particularly Chapter 6, remains the reference point, the legal and political reference point for settling conflicts. Mediation and dialogue play the most important role. In this regard, we engaged in security talks with Israel, brokered by the United States, who remained committed to achieving peace in the region and sparing the people of the region the scourge of destruction and wars. Although this path did not yet produce tangible results on the ground, however, we are keen to continue with these efforts to break the stalemate and reach agreements acceptable to all parties and that would achieve security and stability in the region, especially that New Syria has declared since day one that it does not wish to go to war with anyone, and it is ready to discuss security concerns of everyone through dialogue, which we believe is the best way to reach a solution. Mr. President, we welcome the positive response to this new Syrian approach by the international community and this Council in order to strengthen stability in the region. In conclusion, those who have known war also know the value of peace. And they know that mediation requires courageous solutions and realistic approaches. This is what we've experienced in Syria during years of struggle against the former regime through local mediation and field mediation that we have carried out, along with courageous approaches based on our field expertise that allow us to distinguish between successful and unsuccessful approaches. The long civilizational experience of Syria and what we have learned from our crises have reaffirmed time and again that the destiny of Syria is to bring people together and not to tear them apart, to be a space for harmony and peace and not wars and tragedy. Syria is ready to practice its positive role to contribute to resolving regional and international conflicts. This is part of our recovery process. This is part of our civilizational responsibility, we, the Syrian people, are ready for this, not just in words, but also in deeds. I thank you, Mr. President.
Gracias.
I thank you. I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic, and I apologize to the representative of Qatar because I arrived a little bit late to the room. And now we will hear from the representative of Egypt. I was there recently, in fact. Thank you, and yes, you may begin.
Mr. President, allow me to thank you for your distinguished leadership of the Council's deliberations this month and leadership of this session. I also express appreciation to the briefers for the valuable information provided. I would like to raise the following 4 points. First, the success of mediation efforts to settle conflicts in the Middle East remains contingent upon political will to end wars and address their root causes. We need approaches that are based on the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, international law, and Security Council resolutions. Approaches that are underpinned by respect for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of states, non-interference in their internal affairs, refraining from the use of force, and rejecting policies that impose fait accompli. Second, peace in the Middle East cannot be achieved without a just settlement of the Palestinian question, ending the Israeli occupation, and establishing the independent Palestinian state along the lines of the 4th of June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, in implementation of the two-state solution. Against this background, Egypt supported President Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza. We are contributing daily to efforts aimed at ensuring that the various parties fulfill their commitments under this plan, in cooperation and coordination with mediation partners, namely the United States, Qatar, and Turkey. While we're gathered here to support and strengthen efforts to end the war, to restore stability, and alleviate the humanitarian suffering of the people of Gaza, the world is witnessing escalatory measures by Israel in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. Attempts to liquidate the Palestinian cause, displace Palestinians from their land, alter the existing historical and legal status quo in Jerusalem and its Islamic and Christian holy sites, and the systematic targeting of humanitarian organizations and UN bodies, particularly UNRWA. In addition to restrictions imposed on the Palestinian Authority, we therefore condemn this destructive Israeli approach, and we call upon the Security Council to assume its role in demanding that Israel, the occupying power, implement international resolutions, including resolutions 2434 and 2803. Third, the blatant Israeli violations of Lebanon's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity require a firm stance from the international community represented by this Council. While Lebanon has taken a courageous and historic decision to work towards reaching a peaceful and lasting settlement to the conflict with Israel under U.S. auspices, Israel continues unabated to flagrantly violate Lebanese sovereignty, displace and kill its people, and threaten its social fabric. This reinforces the point I raised earlier, that any mediation efforts in the Middle East will inevitably be stymied by the absence of political will and the precedence given to illusions of settlement by military and coercive force. A case in point is the situation in Syria. Israel is violating Syria's sovereignty, usurping its territory, and threatening civil peace. This only underscores the dilemma facing our region, obstructing efforts to achieve peace and security in the region. Egypt renews its call for Israel's withdrawal from all Syrian territories, including the occupied Syrian Golan, and for the implementation of relevant Security Council resolutions. Fourth and finally, Egypt condemns the Iranian attacks against the Gulf Arab states and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and the Republic of Iraq. It is of utmost importance to swiftly reach an agreement between the United States and Iran that takes into account the concerns of all relevant parties, most notably the countries of the Gulf region. In this regard, Egypt values the effective mediation led by Pakistan, with the support of regional partners, including Egypt. Regional parties, including Egypt, with the aim of sparing the region the dangers of escalation, tension, and terrorism, while addressing all pending issues, including the Iranian nuclear file and freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. These efforts thereby contribute to ending wars and overcoming the grave security, economic, and geopolitical repercussions that the region is witnessing. Mr. President, in conclusion, Egypt renews its commitment to supporting all efforts aimed at settling disputes through peaceful means and to working within the framework of the United Nations and with regional and international partners to achieve peace and security and to unlock the potential for development and progress in the Middle East. Thank you, Mr. President.
Bien, gracias.
Thank you to the representative of Egypt. He will be followed by the representative of Kuwait. You may have the floor.
I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of members of the core group of the shared commitment on UNRWA, namely Algeria, Brazil, Guyana, Indonesia, Ireland, Jordan, Kuwait, Luxembourg, Norway, State of Palestine, Qatar, South Africa, Spain, and Turkey. As the Council discusses pathways towards lasting peace in the Middle East through mediation and dialogue, we wish to reaffirm a fundamental principle of the Charter of the United Nations. Sustainable peace can only be achieved through respect for international law, the protection of civilians, the implementation of relevant Security Council resolutions, and the preservation of the humanitarian institutions that sustain vulnerable populations during times of conflict. Efforts that undermine these principles not only exacerbate human suffering, but also weaken the foundations upon which durable peace and security must be built. In this regard, the situation facing UNRWA remains deeply alarming. For more than 7 decades, UNRWA has served as an indispensable lifeline for Palestine refugees across its 5 fields of operation. Today, however, the agency continues to face attacks by Israel, the occupying power, an unprecedented campaign aimed at restricting, discrediting, and marginalizing its work at a time when its services are in need more than ever. We strongly condemn the continued unilateral attacks against the agency, its personnel, its premises, and its operations in clear violation of international law. The death of 391 UNRWA colleagues represent the highest loss of aid workers in the history of the United Nations. Schools, health centers, shelters, and other UN facilities have been deliberately destroyed, damaged, occupied, or rendered inoperable. At the same time, increasing restrictions continue to impede the agency's ability to carry out its mandate and reach those most in need. We further express our grave concern regarding measures aimed at obstructing UNRWA's operations in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. We deplore the occupation, the closure, and demolition of UNRWA's facilities, including Israel's recent decision to establish military facilities at the UNRWA compound in East Jerusalem, and the forced closure of schools and health centers, and other actions that seek to undermine the agency's ability to fulfill its UN mandate. These actions constitute breaches of the Charter of the United Nations and the Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, and undermine the principles governing the protection of humanitarian and United Nations personnel in situations of armed conflict. We are equally concerned by ongoing efforts to marginalize UNRWA and restrict its ability to carry out its core mandate. Such measures undermine the agency's capacity to provide essential education, healthcare, relief, and social services to millions of Palestine refugees and jeopardize a humanitarian lifeline upon which countless families depend on. At a time of immense humanitarian need, weakening UNRWA's operational capacity can only deepen suffering, increase instability, and further erode the conditions necessary for peace and recovery. Furthermore, such restrictions run counter to the advisory opinion issued by the International Court of Justice on the 22nd of October 2025, according to which Israel remains under the obligation to facilitate humanitarian assistance provided by the United Nations and its agencies in Gaza, including UNRWA. Mr. President, until a just solution to the plight of Palestine refugees is implemented, UNRWA is and will remain indispensable and irreplaceable, representing a lifeline for almost 6 million people in the OPT, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. We therefore reaffirm our support for UNRWA and its mandate as entrusted by the United Nations General Assembly. We call for the protection of its personnel, premises, and operations, and for the preservation of the operational space necessary for the agency to carry out its responsibilities safely, effectively, and in accordance with its UN mandate and without interference. As 2026 marks the midpoint of the horizon for implementation of the Kelowna report, we commend UNRWA for maintaining a strong focus on consolidating gains, embedding reforms within institutional culture, operational practices, and regulatory frameworks, and managing implementation risks proactively. We also underscore the urgent need for predictable, adequate, and sustainable funding at a time when humanitarian needs continue to grow. Supporting UNRWA is not only a humanitarian imperative, it is an investment in regional stability, human dignity, and the prospects for a just and lasting peace. The upcoming UNRWA Pledging Conference on the 30th of June here in New York is an opportunity to do so. Mr. President, if mediation and dialogue are to deliver a lasting peace in the Middle East on the basis of the two-state solution, the international community must also safeguard the institutions that preserves lives, sustains communities, and uphold hope amid conflict. In this regard, UNRWA remains an indispensable pillar of international efforts to advance peace, stability, and human security in the region. Thank you, Mr. President.
Gracias.
Thank you to the representative of Kuwait. I Well, it says other here, not Rule 37. I don't really understand why, but the Republic of Colombia has requested that what today is called the Observer State of Palestine is actually called the State of Palestine. And that is why I will now give the floor to the representative of the State of Palestine.
Mr. President, thank you for this gesture, and also allow me first to thank Colombia for organizing this timely open debate on peace in the Middle East at the presidential level. And I want to add the voice of the State of Palestine to all those who have welcomed you among us in the Security Council and for presiding over this important meeting. Allow me also to thank Colombia, South Africa, and the other countries who launched the Hague Group at the height of the genocide. And I was honored to be sitting next to you in Colombia when there was a high-level meeting for that group a few months ago. We also thank the Secretary General for his briefing and for his relentless efforts to achieve a just and lasting peace in the Middle East and to uphold the UN Charter and international law. Mr. President, there are those who believe the Middle East is one war away from peace. We believe the Middle East is one peace away from peace. The peace that would end the Israeli occupation and bring about Palestinian independence, in line with the relevant UN resolutions leading to the implementation of the two-state solution. The Arab Peace Initiative and the New York Declaration have encompassed this vision and translated it into urgently needed action. Until just and lasting peace is achieved in accordance with the relevant UN resolutions guaranteeing peace, security, and prosperity for all, it is essential to ensure protection of civilians. And Palestinian civilians are anything but protected. They are targeted by Israeli bombardments in Gaza even after the ceasefire was declared, and by Israeli occupying forces and Israeli settlers terrorizing communities in the West Bank. Mediation is critical to deal with conflicts, but if it is to produce lasting outcomes, it needs to be grounded and anchored in international law. While efforts to achieve ceasefire in Gaza were underway, we worked closely with the mediators, the US, Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, and eventually with the 8 Arab and Islamic countries and the Security Council to anchor 6 principles in the ceasefire agreement and resolution 2803, namely, 1, fully respected ceasefire, which should be permanent. 2, humanitarian aid and access in accordance with international law principles. 3, no occupation, no annexation. 4, no forcible displacement. 5, reunification of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip under the Palestinian Authority. And 6, and last, self-determination and independence, Palestinian statehood. Mediation to work requires legitimacy and power. In this regard, the UN remains of cardinal importance for all such efforts. There is also no ceasefire agreement without the personal involvement of President Trump himself. Without the consistent efforts of the other mediators, including at the highest level, without the support of the regional actors and the international community and the pressure they brought to bear. However, agreements and international law requires enforcement. Mediation and dialogue need accountability to ensure all parties respect their obligations. fire has not ceased and almost 1,000 Palestinians have been killed. Aid is still being obstructed and humanitarian access for the UN and NGOs is being severely restricted. Israel is now controlling 70% of the Gaza Strip with the aim to annex it, and 2 million Palestinians are squeezed in 30% of the Gaza Strip in unlivable conditions to forcibly displace them. The Palestinian Authority is subject to an all-out assault aiming at its collapse, and Israel's war against Palestinian self-determination and statehood is evident everywhere, from the E1 plan to the Jordan Valley, from Gaza to East Jerusalem. It is time to rein in Israel's colonial appetite, evident not only in Palestine but also in Lebanon, where the civilian population is experiencing untold suffering, and in Syria. It is time to support the government in these countries trying to protect their people, their territorial integrity, their sovereignty, and to enforce the principle of one state, one law, one gun. Palestine still requires the full mobilization of all actors. If all these horrors could take place while the world is watching, can you imagine what will happen when the world is distracted or looks away? It is time to end the occupation and conflict, to respect the sovereignty, and I thank you very much, Mr. President.
Bien, gracias al señor representante.
I thank the representative of the State of Palestine. I will continue with the list with the Islamic Republic of Iran, because I think I'll have to go back to my country soon. And so now I will give the floor to the representative of Oman. You have the floor.
فخامة الرئيس غوستافو بيترو يشرفني في
Your Excellency, President Gustavo Petro Arrego, at the outset, I would like to extend to Your Excellency our sincere appreciation for presiding over this important open debate. We express Sultanate of Oman's appreciation to Colombia for selecting this topic, a topic that touches upon the very core of the challenge facing the Middle East today, namely transforming opportunities for de-escalation into sustainable peace and turning political understandings into lasting stability. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the lessons of past decades are clear. Crises that have not been addressed at the roots have re-emerged in new forms, and conflicts lacking just a settlement have continued to cast their shadows over the region's security and stability generation after generation. Hence, the value of political solution lies not only in their ability to contain crises, but in their capacity to address the underlying causes and to open real prospects for peace, stability, and development. It has been demonstrated that building trust among parties, respecting the sovereignty of states, adhering to international law, and providing spaces for dialogue and understanding are not merely ideal principles. They are political necessities dictated by the nature and complexity of crises. Experience has also shown that successful mediation is that which helps parties move from managing disputes to addressing their root causes. Your Excellency, Mr. President, when discussing the issues that continue to affect the security and stability of the Middle East, the Palestinian question remains the most prominent and ever present. After decades of resolutions, initiatives, and international efforts, the Palestinian people are still awaiting for the principles endorsed by the international community to be translated into tangible reality. The occupied Palestinian territory continue to remind us that peace is not secured through temporary calm, but through justice, and that stability remains incomplete so long as the legitimate rights of an entire people continue to wait and await redress. The recent events in the occupied Palestinian territories have revealed the magnitude of humanitarian and political costs resulting from the absence of a political horizon. They have confirmed that addressing this issue is no longer only necessary to achieve justice for the Palestinian people, but is also essential for the stability of the entire region. Accordingly, the Sultanate of Oman affirms that achieving just and lasting peace requires ending the occupation, enabling the Palestinian people to exercise their right to self-determination, and to establish their independent state on the borders of June 4, 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, in accordance with international resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. Your Excellency, Mr. President, the Middle East does not need more crisis management as much as it needs to establish a collective conviction that peace is a strategic choice and that addressing the causes of conflicts represents an investment in the security of peoples, the stability of states, and the future of coming generations. In this context, the United Nations, by virtue of its international legitimacy, remains called upon to continue supporting mediation efforts, good offices, and preventive diplomacy. It is required to strengthen complementarity between international and regional initiatives in a manner that builds trust and creates conditions conducive to sustainable political solutions. The Sultanate of Oman will continue, guided by its steadfast approach, based on wisdom, moderation, mutual respect, and good neighborliness, to support every effort aimed at bridging differences, enhancing understanding, and consolidating peace. This stems from our belief that true security is not built on balance of power alone, but on justice, trust, and the ability to translate the legitimate aspirations of peoples into reality, one that fosters stability and preserves human dignity. Thank you, Mr. President.
Gracias, señor representante.
I thank the representative of Oman. I give the floor to the representative of the United Arab Emirates.
سيد الرئيس، أود في البداية
Mr. President, I would like first to thank the Republic of Colombia for organizing this open debate and to express my appreciation to you, Your Excellency, President Gustavo Petro, for chairing this session. Undoubtedly, Colombia's experience in national reconciliation offers valuable lessons to address the current challenges. I would also like to extend my gratitude to His Excellency Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his valuable briefing. Mr. President, the United Arab Emirates believes in the importance of dialogue and mediation in settling conflicts and preventing their outbreak or escalation. In this regard, our efforts included engagement in numerous individual and collective efforts aimed at breaking the stalemate and deadlock in regional and international crises. My country has facilitated 24 prisoner exchange operations between Russia and Ukraine, leading to the return of more than 7,000 individuals to their homes and families. We also continue to support efforts towards a sustainable political solution in the occupied Palestinian territory, in Sudan, and in other conflicts in our region and beyond. In the context of today's discussion, I would like to reiterate the following points. First, effective mediation must be grounded in neutrality, integrity, and acceptance by all concerned parties. It has to be grounded on the ability to communicate with all relevant stakeholders while remaining credible and showing respect for state sovereignty and the principles of international law, including the principles of the UN Charter. Second, It is crucial that any mediation effort be accompanied by robust follow-up and verification mechanisms to ensure the effective implementation of such agreements and their translation into sustainable peace. The Colombian experience clearly demonstrated that the success of mediation efforts cannot be measured solely by the signing of agreements. Rather, it depends on the establishment of implementation and verification mechanisms, an approach embodied by UN efforts to monitor progress toward peace in Colombia over recent years. Third, dialogue and mediation efforts must serve as a fundamental pillar of crisis prevention, rather than being limited to responding to crises after they have already erupted. The most dangerous wars and crises in history did not emerge overnight. Instead, they were the result of years or even decades of accumulation and unaddressed factors, such as extremism, hate speech, or violations of international law. In this context, Security Council Resolution 2686 underscores the importance of ensuring inclusivity in mediation efforts, including by engaging women, youth, and local communities. Culture, identity, and ethnicity must also be viewed as unifying rather than divisive elements, thereby fostering understanding and contributing to the resolution of tensions before they escalate. Mr. President, this important discussion comes at a time of serious developments in our region. Despite the ongoing mediation and diplomatic efforts to de-escalate tensions and achieving a peaceful and lasting settlement, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been for more than 100 days targeting civilians and critical infrastructure in the United Arab Emirates and several neighboring countries by launching thousands of missiles and drones, either directly or through their affiliated militias and proxies. This is instead of engaging constructively in diplomacy. Such actions weaken the prospects for peace and further erode regional trust. These terrorist attacks have continued despite the adoption of Security Council Resolution 2817, in clear violation of the resolution and the principles of international law. These attacks remain an ongoing threat to regional and international peace and security. In conclusion, Mr. President, the United Arab Emirates will continue to support dialogue and mediation efforts and to work with our partners to strengthen security and stability in the region and around the world. Thank you, Mr. President.
Bien, gracias.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates, and just something as the President of Colombia, I would like to reply and speak to Colombia's example in terms of peace. We know what war is, and we are experiencing a war. And peace is the basis for social justice. And we support this, and I want Colombia to I want to make it clear that this is Colombia's position. We want to reach the SDGs throughout the world as they have been proclaimed by the United Nations, because part of violence is not just a lack or a breakdown of social communication, but rather social injustice throughout the world, as I said in my statement, and there are tangible instruments for that, which are the goals of the United Nations. And with that, I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the name of God, the Compassionate, the Merciful, we welcome the President of Colombia's leadership in convening and presiding over this important high-level open debate. In the context of today's discussion, I would like to highlight following points. First, to To advance peace, stability and security in the Middle East, the Security Council must address the root causes of the conflict and instability. These include the continued occupation of Palestinian, Lebanese and Syrian territories, repeated acts of aggression by the Israeli regime across the region, and the prolonged military presence of the United States in the region, coupled with its malicious policies of hegemony that have fueled confrontation, insecurity and mistrust for decades. Until occupation and aggression persist, resistance against it will continue. No political or diplomatic process can legitimize or justify occupation or aggression, nor can any durable solution be achieved without addressing this fundamental reality. Accordingly, lasting peace, stability and collective security in the region require an end to the occupation, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, accountability for acts of aggression, and the consistent application of international law without selectivity or double standard. Only on this basis can the region move toward genuine peace, stability and shared security. Second, recent development in the region, particularly unwarranted and unjustified war waged by the United States against Iran, have once again demonstrated that the continued foreign military presence in the Persian Gulf cannot bring lasting security to the region. Sustainable peace, stability and security can only be achieved through dialogue, cooperation and confidence building among the countries of the region themselves, on the basis of mutual respect, sovereign equality, good neighborliness and full adherence to international law and the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, free from external interference and coercion. Third, the United States and Israeli regime have repeatedly violated the comprehensive ceasefire of 8 April. In the face of these continuing violations and armed attack, Iran has exercised and will continue to exercise its inherent right to self-defense as recognized under Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations. In response to any act of aggression, Iran remains fully determined to defend its sovereignty, territorial integrity, national security and its people. The United States and the Israeli regime, as the aggressors, will bear full responsibility for all consequences arising from their unlawful action of any ensuing escalation. Fourth, no sustainable deal can be reached through threats, intimidation or the use of force. The President of the United States should refrain from his recurring threats against Iran, including his renewed threat of force made today. Iran has never negotiated under threats and pressure and will never submit to pressure or coercion. The United States has repeatedly pursued this failed policy and should have learned by now that the threats and military intimidation are counterproductive. If Washington is genuinely interested in a diplomatic solution, it must abandon the language of threats and engage with Iran on the basis of mutual respect, sovereign equality and full adherence to international law. I thank you.
Bueno, gracias.
Thank you. I will now give the floor and listen to the representative of Indonesia, and then I will be stepping away.
التنمية في أي دولة محتاجة جهد وعمل وإخلاص من كل أجهزتها.
It's 11 p.m. local time. Welcome to the top stories of the hour. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said Egypt and the Democratic Republic of Congo are determined to continue drive to increase trade exchange and encourage investments and cooperation between both countries in vital fields, notably in irrigation, water resources and mutual projects. The President was addressing a joint press conference with President Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC following their talks in Cairo. President al-Sisi said Egypt is committed to consolidating dams projects in the Democratic Republic of Congo in support of development for its people. He added that Egypt will continue supplying DR of Congo with technical support and building capabilities for the fellow African states' national cadres, hailing the wise and responsible positions of Kinshasa regarding the Nile water file. Foreign Minister Badr Abdel Ati hosted a joint press conference on Wednesday with his Eritrean counterpart Osman Saleh as part of an official visit to Cairo by an Eritrean delegation led by President Isaias Afwerki. Abdel Ati welcomed his Eritrean counterpart and asserted on the depth of the bilateral ties between Egypt and Eritrea. Abdel Ati highlighted the fruitful talks held between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his Eritrean counterpart on Monday. He underscored that the discussions reaffirmed a convergence of views on regional and international issues of mutual concern. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres warned Wednesday of the risk of return to full war in the Middle East after Iran and the United States traded strikes. Secretary General Guterres was speaking at a meeting of the UN Security Council devoted to the situation in the Middle East. The UN Rights Chief Volker Turk echoed Guterres, saying he was horrified by the fact that we see escalation upon escalation, adding that international law needs to be respected in full. Earlier, the U.S. Military Central Command said U.S. fighter jets targeted Iranian air defense, ground control stations, and surveillance radar sites a day after a U.S. Army attack helicopter crashed near the Strait of Hormuz after colliding with an Iranian drone. Iran said U.S. strikes hit 2 water reservoirs in its southern city of Sirik, cutting off water to thousands of people. It also acknowledged strikes around Bandar Abbas and Qishm Island. Tehran later claimed attacks in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan. The UN Atomic Watchdog Board on Wednesday demanded Iran fully cooperate with the agency, provide complete information about its stockpile of near weapons-grade nuclear material, and grant its inspectors access to Iranian nuclear sites. The resolution stressed that providing information and access are essential and urgent in order to enable the International Atomic Energy Agency to verify that there is no diversion of nuclear material. 21 countries on the International Atomic Energy Agency's 35-member Board of Governors voted that for the resolution of the IAEA's headquarters in Vienna. Russia, China, and Niger opposed it, while 10 countries abstained and 1 did not vote as it was in arrears. The resolution was put forward by France, the United Kingdom, Germany, and the United States. I'm Hania Shinawi, and thank you for watching.